I have told this story maybe 40 times now. To my own kind, to the inspectors, once to a room full of military officers who did not believe a word of it until they checked the recordings. And every time I tell it, somebody asks me the same thing at the end. They ask, were you afraid of them? And I always say the same thing back. No, I was afraid for them. And then I understood why the rest of the galaxy is afraid of them. Those are not the same fear. They are not even close. Let me start from the beginning. The real beginning, not the part everyone wants to hear about. My name does not translate well, so the humans called me Sail. It was easier for their mouths, and I did not mind. I am Thren. If you have never met one of my people, picture something soft. We are not soft in our minds, understand me. We are soft in our bodies. Thin limbs. A shell on the back that looks harder than it is. Big eyes because we evolved in the dark under canopy, where the things that hunted us were faster and stronger than we were. My people survived the way prey survives. We learned to listen before we learned to speak. We learned to leave a room before the trouble came in. There is an old saying among the Thren, and it goes, the one who runs first lives longest. We are not ashamed of it. It kept us alive for 200,000 years. So you have to understand what kind of creature I am, to understand the rest of this. I worked communications on a refueling drift called Drennan Reach. If you have never heard of it, that is normal. Nobody had heard of it. It hung at the edge of the charted lanes, past the last clean jump point, in the kind of dark where the stars get thin and you start to feel how big the empty really is. The station was old, older than the company that ran it. It had been welded onto, cut apart, welded back together so many times that nobody really knew its original shape anymore. There were corridors that led to nothing, doors that opened onto vacuum if you were stupid enough to force them. The whole place groaned when the heat cycled, a long, low sound like something turning over in its sleep. We refueled the freighters that ran the long route between the inner systems and the mining colonies further out. That was the whole job. Ships came in tired, we filled them, they left. Most of them did not even shut down their engines all the way. They were in a hurry. Everybody on the long route was always in a hurry. There were maybe 30 of us living on Drennan Reach, a mix. You get a mix out at the edge. There were 4 Solani who keep to themselves and smell faintly of metal. There was a Thren family, not mine, but kin enough that we shared meals on the rest days. There were a handful of Garu, big and slow and patient, good with the heavy machinery. A Vesh who ran the galley and complained about everything. And there were 6 humans. 6. I want you to hold that number in your head. 6 humans out of 30, they were not in charge. They were not the strongest crew on the station, not by raw count. The Garu could have folded a human in half without trying. They were not the smartest either. The Solani ran the navigation math and the humans deferred to them on it without any pride about it. The humans were just there, doing the work, 6 of them. There was Petra, who ran the dock cranes and had a scar through one eyebrow that she never explained. There was an old one named Marco, who everybody just called the old man, who had been out on the edge longer than anyone and who slept 4 hours a night and walked the corridors the rest of the time like he was listening for something. There were 2 young ones, a brother and sister, Iris and Deshan, fresh from some inner colony, still soft, still laughing at things. There was a quiet one named Hollies who fixed things nobody else could fix and who I rarely heard speak more than 10 words at a stretch. And there was their lead, a woman named Captain Renata Voss, though nobody called her Captain. They called her Ren. I liked them. I will say that plainly because it matters for the rest. I liked the humans. They were warm, actually warm. Their bodies ran hot. You could feel it standing near them. They laughed too loud. They touched each other constantly, on the shoulder, on the arm, leaning into each other, and at first this disturbed me deeply because among my people, touch is something you earn over years. But I got used to it. After a while, I even started to understand it a little. What I did not understand yet was what they were. I thought I knew. I thought humans were like the rest of us, just louder. I thought the stories were exaggerated. You hear stories out in the galaxy about humans. Everybody does. The Solani would not crew a ship with more than 2 of them. The Garu, who fear almost nothing, got quiet when humans came up in conversation and changed the subject. There were treaties, actual treaties, that named humanity specifically, that set limits on where their warships could travel, how many they could build, written by species who had fought them once and decided, with great care, never to do it again. I thought all of that was old history and inflated nonsense. I thought the galaxy feared humans the way a child fears the dark, out of habit, out of stories told to keep the young ones in line. I was wrong, but I had to live through one long, terrible night to learn how wrong. It started ordinary. That is the part nobody believes, but it is true. The worst nights of your life almost always start ordinary. It was a slow rotation. 2 freighters in the queue, both small, neither in any particular hurry for once. I was in the comms ring, which was my little kingdom, a curved room high in the station's spine with screens all around and a window, a real window, plated glass, very old, that looked out at the dark. I liked that window. On a slow rotation, I would dim the screens and just look out at the nothing for a while. It calmed me. My people are nervous by nature. The big empty, strangely, is one of the few things that does not frighten me. It is too vast to be a threat. It is just there. Petra came up to bring me a cup of the hot, bitter thing the humans drink. She did this sometimes. She knew I could not drink it, it would have made me sick, but she brought it anyway, 2 cups, and drank both herself and sat with me, and that was her way of keeping company. Thren do not need much talk to feel kept company with. Petra understood that better than most of her kind. "Quiet," she said, looking at the queue. "I don't like quiet." "Quiet is good," I told her. "Quiet means nothing is wrong." She made a sound in her throat, a doubtful sound. "Quiet means something's getting ready to be wrong," she said. "Different thing." I thought she was being dramatic. Humans are dramatic. I told her so, and she laughed, and she did not argue, but she also did not look away from the queue for a long while. I should have listened to her. My whole life I had been taught to listen to the nervous one in the room. And here I was, a Thren, the most nervous species the galaxy had ever produced, ignoring the human who was telling me something felt wrong. The first sign came at the edge of my long-range scope. A contact. Just one way out where contacts are not supposed to be because there is nothing out there to come from. No lane, no colony, no reason. I marked it and watched it. Single ship. Not transmitting. Drifting in slow, engines cold, riding momentum, which is what you do when you do not want to be seen. My stomach went tight. That is the Thren warning. We feel danger in the gut before the mind catches up. 200,000 years of being eaten will do that to a species. I called it down to the station floor. Wren answered. Her voice was flat and unhurried, which I would later learn was the most dangerous version of her voice. "How many?" she asked. "1 contact, cold, not transmitting." A pause. "There's never one," she said. "Sail, look harder." I looked harder. She was right. There were more. They had been hiding behind the first one, riding its shadow, staggered out so that from the front they looked like a single return. 3, then 5. Then I stopped counting out loud because I did not want to hear my own voice say the number. 9 ships, coming in cold and silent toward a refueling drift with 30 souls on it, and nothing to defend itself with. We had a few cutting tools. We had the Garu, who were strong. We had a single old defense turret that had not been fired in a decade, and that the company's last inspector had written up as non-functional. That was Dren and Reach. That was all of us. "Karuvit," Wren said. I heard her say it even though she was not talking to me anymore. She was talking to her own people and the comm was still open. "Those are Karuvit hulls. Marco, confirm." The old man's voice came in, gravelly and certain. "Confirmed. Stripping party. 9 means they mean to take the whole station apart and sell it." I did not know much about the Karuvit then. I know too much about them now. They are scavengers, but that word is too gentle. They do not salvage wrecks. They make wrecks and then they salvage them. They come into a place, they take the people first, because people sell in the dark markets out past the law, and then they take everything that is not welded down, and then they take the things that are welded down too, and they leave a hollow drifting shell behind. They do not negotiate. They have no use for negotiation. You cannot bargain with something that has already decided you are inventory. I felt the old fear rise in me, the deep one, the prey fear. And with it came the old instinct, clear as a voice in my head. Run. Get to a pod. Get out into the dark before they arrive. The one who runs first lives longest. That is what I am. That is what I was built to be. I am ashamed to tell you that I half stood out of my chair to do exactly that. And then I looked at the screen, and I saw what the humans were doing, and I sat back down. Here is what they did. They did not panic. I want to be precise about this because it is the heart of the whole thing. They did not panic, but it was not because they were calm. I could see Iris and Deshan on the floor camera, the two young ones, and they were terrified. Iris had her hand pressed over her mouth. Deshan had gone gray. They were children, really, by their own measure, and they had just learned they were probably going to die or worse. But Ren did not stop to comfort them. She did something I did not understand at the time and only understood later. She gave them jobs. Iris, get to the lower ring, seal every bulkhead behind you as you go, manual overrides, don't trust the system. Deshan with me. Marco, the turret, I know what the report says, get it working anyway. Hollies, and here she paused, and I heard the only soft thing in her voice the whole night. Hollies, you know what to do. And the quiet one, Hollies, said one word. He said, yeah. I did not know what that meant. You know what to do. It sounded like the end of an old conversation, one they had had before, maybe many times in many dark places. It sounded like something agreed on long ago. Then Ren did the thing that broke my understanding of the universe in half. She did not call for everyone to flee. She called everyone in. Every soul on Drennan Reach she pulled toward the station core, toward the most defensible point, the old machine heart where the welds were thickest and there was only one way in. The Solani went quick and quiet. The Garu went heavy and slow. The other Thren family went, and I watched the parent gather the small ones close and hurry them along, and my own gut twisted at the sight, because every instinct I had was screaming that gathering together was wrong. That you scatter and hide, and some of you live. But the humans were not trying to make some of us live. That was the difference. I see it so clearly now. My people faced with a predator we cannot beat except the loss. We grieve it in advance. We say the herd scatters and the slow ones are taken and the rest go on, and that is the way of things, and we mourn and we continue. It is not cowardice. I will not let anyone call it cowardice. It is arithmetic. It is the cold, ancient arithmetic of survival, and it kept my whole species breathing through ages that swallowed crueler creatures whole. The humans did not do arithmetic. Or rather, they did, but they came out the other side of it somewhere I could not follow. I called down to Ren. My voice was shaking. I am not proud of that, but it was. Captain Ren, there are 9 of them. We cannot. There are 9. You have to let people get to the pods. You have to. How long until they dock? She asked, flat, unhurried. 40 minutes, maybe less. Then we've got 40 minutes, she said, like that settled something, and cut the channel to me to deal with the rest of it. We've got 40 minutes. Not we've only got 40 minutes. Not there's no time. We've got 40 minutes. As if 40 minutes were a thing you could hold in your hands and use. As if it were enough. As if anything could be enough against 9 Karuvit stripping hulls. I sat in my comms ring and I looked out my old window at the cold dots growing larger, and I did the most unthren thing I have ever done in my life. I stayed. I want to tell you about Marco and the turret, because that is when I started to understand. The old man went down to the dorsal turret housing, which was a cramped, freezing little blister on the top of the station that nobody ever went into. The turret had been written up as dead. Not damaged, dead. The inspector had logged it. The company had decided repairing it cost more than the station was worth, and that had been the end of it. Everyone on the station knew the turret did not work. It was a fact, like the cold of the dark or the groan of the heat cycle. Marco did not care that it was a fact. I had a camera in the turret housing. I do not know why I watched. I should have been watching the Karuvit. But I watched the old man instead, and I am glad I did. Because of all the things I saw that night, this small thing is the one I think about most. He pulled the access panels. He was talking the whole time, low to himself or to the turret, I could not tell. The cold up there was brutal, I could see his breath fogging, and his hands were old, the joints swollen, and he worked them anyway, ripping out a burned relay, splicing in something he had brought up with him in a bag he apparently kept ready, which told me this was not the first dead thing he had decided to bring back to life. There was a moment the turret tried to come alive and then died again, a cough of power and then nothing, and a human, I think, would have cursed. Marco did not curse. He went still. He put his swollen old hand flat on the turret's housing, gentle, the way you would touch something living, and he said something to it. I had the audio. I have listened to it many times since. He said, "Come on, not tonight. We don't quit tonight. We don't quit." He was talking to the machine like it was on the crew, like it was one of them. Like quitting was a thing they had decided together, the old man and the dead turret, that they were not going to do. And then he tried again, and it lived. I did not understand it. A Solani would have run the numbers, seen the turret was non-functional and not wasted a second on it. A Thren would have done the same. The machine was dead, the dead stay dead. You do not argue with a fact. But the old man did not accept the fact. He took the fact in his swollen hands and he simply refused it with his whole stubborn body, and the universe, I swear this is true, the universe flinched first. The turret came on. That is the first thing I learned that night about why the galaxy fears humans. It is not their strength. It is that they do not accept facts that the rest of us accept. A thing is dead, so it is dead, that is sense, that is the order of the universe. The humans look at the dead thing and they say not tonight, and sometimes, often enough to be terrifying, the universe blinks. The Karuvit hailed us when they got close. They were not worried. Why would they be? They had 9 ships and we were a half-rotted drift station with no teeth. I patched their hail through to Ren. I listened. I should not have, but I did. I was past following rules by then. The Karuvit voice came through wet and clicking, the translator straining to make sense of it. It did not bother with threats. That was the worst part. It was almost bored. It told us to stand down, to open the docks, to gather in the main hold, that those who complied would be processed with minimal damage to inventory value. Inventory value. It called us that. It called Iris and Deshan and the small Thren children and all of us. It called us inventory, and it was not even cruel about it. It was administrative, and somehow that was worse than any cruelty I had ever heard. Ren let it finish, then she answered. I do not know what I expected. Defiance, maybe. A brave speech. Humans have brave speeches in their old stories. I had heard a few from Iris on the slow nights, tales from their homeworld about last stands and refused surrenders. Ren did not make a speech. She said one sentence, and her voice when she said it was the flattest, quietest, most unhurried it had been all night. And that was when I got afraid, sitting alone in my comms ring, afraid of the human whose side I was on. She said, "There are 6 of us, and you have made a mistake." Then she cut the channel. 6 of us, not 36. She did not mean the station. She meant the humans. She was telling the Karuvit, who did not understand, who could not have understood, that the relevant number on Drennan Reach was not 30 souls of inventory. It was 6 humans, and that 6 was enough to be a mistake. The Karuvit did not answer. They came on. 9 cold hulls, and the docking lights of the lead ship blinking awake as it lined up on our main lock. And down in the core, the humans got ready. I have to tell you about Holly's now. The quiet one. You know what to do, Ren had said, and he had said yeah, and I did not understand it, and now I have to make you understand it the way it was made clear to me slowly over the worst hour of my life. Hollies went down into the guts of the station, not the core where everyone else was gathering the opposite way. Down, alone, into the oldest part of Drennan Reach, the parts that led to nothing, the dead corridors. I lost him on the cameras for a while because half of them down there did not work. When I found him again, on a flickering feed in a junction I had nearly forgotten existed, he was doing something to the fuel lines. Now understand what a refueling drift is. It is, at its heart, a very large amount of volatile fuel held very carefully apart from anything that could ignite it. The entire design philosophy of a station like Drennan Reach is keep the fuel from ever touching a spark. Every safety system, every protocol, every redundant valve, all of it exists for that one purpose. Hollies was, with great care and obvious expertise, undoing all of it. He was rigging the station to burn. Not all at once, he was too skilled for that, and besides, blowing the whole station would have killed everyone, the gathered crew included. He was rigging sections, the docking ring, the lower approaches, the corridors a boarding party would have to come through. He was building a path, a long throat of corridor, and lining the throat with fire that did not yet exist, fire he could call into being at the moment of his choosing. He worked without hurry, that same unhurried quality the captain had, as if there were all the time in the world when there was almost none. His hands were steady. He hummed, a little tunelessly, while he turned the station I lived on into a weapon. I called him, I do not know why. I think I needed to hear a voice that was not the wet clicking of the Karuvet. "Hollies," I said, "what are you doing? You will kill us all." He did not stop working. "Not all," he said, "just the ones who come in. You cannot control fire. Fire does not stay where you put it. The lines." "I know fire," he said, quiet, certain. "Spent 11 years on a fuel hauler. I know exactly where it'll go." A pause. Then softer, almost gentle, the longest string of words I ever heard him say. "Sail, you should get to a pod. You're not built for this. There's no shame in it. Go on. We'll hold the dark long enough for you to clear." And there it was again. We'll hold the dark, for me. For the Thren who was not even one of them, who was not warm, who could not drink their bitter drink, who had liked them but had no claim on them. He was offering, in the middle of rigging himself a death, to buy me time to run. And he meant it. There was no resentment in it at all. He thought it was the right thing, that the soft prey creature should flee, and he was prepared to spend part of his shrinking handful of minutes making sure I could. I did not go to the pod. I will tell you exactly why, because it is the truth, and the truth is the only thing this story is good for. I did not stay because I was brave. I am not brave. I am Thren. I stayed because I suddenly, desperately, did not want to be a creature who ran while these warm, loud, impossible people held the dark behind me. For the first time in my life, the old arithmetic, the one who runs first lives longest, looked to me not like wisdom but like a small and lonely thing. And I did not want to be a small and lonely thing, not that night. So I told Hollies no. I told him I would stay in the comms ring and be his eyes because I could see the whole station from up here, every camera, every feed, and he could not. I could tell him where the Karuvet were. I could time his fire. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Okay," just that, "okay," as if I had passed some test I had not known I was taking. As if the soft creature staying to help had not surprised him at all, had in fact been exactly what he expected of someone worth holding the dark for. I have never in my life felt what I felt in that moment. We do not have a word for it in the Thren tongue. The humans have a word. I learned it later. The word is belonging, and it is a very dangerous word, and I understand now why my people never made one of our own. The lead Karuvet ship docked. I watched it on the main lock camera. The clamps engaged, the umbilical extended. The lock cycled. They had override codes, of course. Scavengers always have codes, and the outer door peeled open, and the Karuvet came through. I had never seen one before, except in old records. They are tall and thin and many-jointed, and they wear the salvage of 100 dead ships as armor, plates and scraps welded into shells, so that each one looks like a small walking wreck, which I suppose is what they are. They carry cutting lances that can open a bulkhead or a body with equal ease. They moved into the docking ring in a long file, unhurried, confident, dozens of them, and behind them more dozens, pouring out of the lead ship like something spilling. Dozens against 6. The Karuvit did not rush. They had no reason to. They fanned out into the docking ring and began methodically to take it apart to mark the valuable things, to advance toward the station's core where the inventory had so conveniently gathered itself. Their lances threw little sparks against the dark metal. Their wet voices clicked back and forth. They were, I realized, completely at ease. This was a job they had done 1,000 times. Find the soft station, dock, walk in, take everything. There was no part of it that had ever gone wrong for them. I watched them flow into the long corridor Hollies had built, the throat, the one lined with fire that did not yet exist. And I watched, on another feed, Holly standing at a junction with his hand resting on a manual valve, his head tilted, listening to me through the comm, waiting. "Sail," he said, "tell me when." My mouth was dry. My hands were shaking on the console. I am Thren. I have never hurt anything in my life. My people do not hurt things. We run, we hide, we listen, we survive. We do not do things like the thing I was about to help do. The corridor filled. The Karuvit poured in, dozens of them, packed into the long throat, advancing toward the core where the children were. Toward the children. Something happened in me then. I do not fully understand it even now. The old Praefear was still there, the run and hide, but underneath it, for the first time in my whole life, something else woke up. Something with teeth. Something I did not know my soft, gentle, ancient species had ever carried, buried so deep under 200,000 years of running that I had not known it was there. The corridor was full. The Karuvit were 30 meters from the corridor. Iris and Deshan and the small Thren ones were on the other side of that door. I watched the feed. I watched the inventory takers, the ones who had called the children inventory value, fill the throat of fire all the way up. And I opened my mouth, and in a voice that did not shake at all, a voice I had never heard come out of me before, I said, "Now Hollies, now. Now Hollies, now." I said it, and then the station screamed. That is the only word for the sound. I have heard Drennan Reach make every noise an old station can make, the groan of the heat cycle, the tick of cooling metal, the long sigh of the air recyclers. I had never heard it scream. But when Hollies turned that valve and the fuel he had bled into the throat of the corridor met the spark he had waiting for it, the whole spine of the station made a sound that went up through my feet and into my shell and rang there like a struck bell. The corridor on my feed went white, just white. The camera died in the same instant it caught the light, so I do not have a recording of what it looked like, only what came after. But I do not need a recording. I have it behind my eyes whenever I close them. The fire went exactly where Holly said it would. He had told me, I know fire, I know exactly where it'll go, and the universe, which had no reason to obey a quiet man with 11 years on a fuel hauler, obeyed him anyway. The blaze ran the length of the throat and stopped at the seals he had left intact, stopped like a trained animal at a line drawn on the floor. And everything inside that length that had been advancing toward the children was simply gone. Dozens of them, the inventory takers, the ones who had never had a job go wrong. I want to tell you I felt something noble. I did not. I am Thren. I have never killed anything, and in the space of one breath I had helped kill more living things than my entire bloodline had killed in 200,000 years of running. My gut heaved. My hands came off the console and I held them against my own chest and I shook. I think I made a sound. I do not remember. And through the calm, very quiet, Holly said, "You did right, Sail, breathe. You did right." He was comforting me. He had just burned a corridor full of the enemy, alone in the dark, and the first thing he did after was reach up through the comm to steady the soft creature who had given the word. I did not understand these people. I am not sure I ever fully will. But I stopped shaking because he told me to, because somehow his voice made it possible. Then the second wave came, and there was no more time for shaking. The Karuvit had not expected the fire, but they did not break. I will give them that. They were not cowards, whatever else they were. They had 8 more ships, and the loss of one boarding party did not change their arithmetic. They simply changed their approach. They stopped funneling through the main throat. They cut new holes. This is what scavengers do. They do not use doors. They bring their lances to the hull and they open the station wherever they please, and now they did it in a dozen places at once, all around the docking ring and the lower decks, opening Drennan Reach like a carcass and pouring in through every wound. I watched it happen on 20 feeds at once and I could not keep track. I tried to call positions to the humans the way I had promised, the way I had stayed to do. Lower 3, 2 of them through the wall, dorsal junction. A cutting team ran there behind you. They came through the floor. And the humans moved. I had thought I understood what humans were after the fire. I did not. The fire was Holly's being clever. What came next was something else, something I had no frame for, and it is the part I most struggle to make my own people believe when I tell this story, because it sounds like a tale told to frighten children. 6 humans against 100 Karuvit, in the dark, in the guts of a dying station. They should have lost in the first minute. By every measure that the galaxy uses to weigh such things, numbers, strength, weapons, position, they should have been overrun before I finished calling out the first 3 breaches. The Karuvit were taller, stronger, armored, armed with lances that cut through bulkheads. The humans had cutting tools and pipes and the close confined corridors and each other. It was not a fight. I have to be careful with my words here because if I call it a fight you will picture something fair, something with 2 sides, and it was not that. It was the humans doing a thing I had no name for, a thing that was closer to work than to battle. Grim, focused, unhurried work. They did not charge. They did not roar. They moved through their own dark station, which they knew, every centimeter of it, the dead corridors and the false doors and the drops that opened onto vacuum, and they used it. They led the Karuvit into the parts of the station that killed you on their own. They sealed bulkheads behind boarding teams and vented them to the dark. They fought in places 3 Karuvit could not stand abreast, where strength and numbers meant nothing, and all that mattered was that the human in front of you would not step back. Petra held a junction alone for what the feed timestamp says was 9 minutes. Petra, who brought me bitter drink on slow nights and called me her quiet friend. 9 minutes, in a gap 2 meters wide with a cutting torch and a length of pipe, against everything the Karuvit sent at her, and she did not give the junction. When Deshan finally reached her to take over, she had a wound down her side that should have put her on the floor, and she did not go to the floor. She just changed places with the boy and went a hold somewhere else. I asked her about it after. I asked her how she did not run. She looked at me like I had asked why water is wet. She said, Iris was behind that junction. As if that were an answer. As if that were the whole and complete and only answer there could ever be. And that is the second thing I learned about why the galaxy fears humans. It is not that they are strong. They are not particularly. It is not that they are fearless. They are not. I saw the fear on every one of their faces all night long, raw and human and real. It is that there is a thing they will stand in front of, a thing they will not step back from no matter what comes, and that thing is each other. You cannot win against that by being stronger. You cannot win against it by being more. The only way to win against a human standing in front of someone they love is to kill that human completely, all the way, and even then. And this is the part the galaxy learned the hard way, the part that is written into those old careful treaties. Even then the next human steps into the gap, and they are angrier than the first. The Karuvit did not understand this. Why would they? They had spent their whole history taking inventory from species that did the sensible thing, the arithmetic thing, the Thren thing, that scattered, that accepted the loss, that let the slow ones go so the rest could live. They had never met a creature that did the math, saw it could not win, and decided the math did not apply to it. They were learning. In the dark, in the guts of Drennan Reach, the Karuvit were getting their education, and it was costing them, and they did not yet understand what it was going to cost them in full. Then Marco fired the turret. I had almost forgotten the old man. He had gone up into the freezing dorsal blister to wake a dead gun, and he had woken it, and I had moved on to the chaos inside the station and stopped watching his feed. So I did not see him get the targeting solution. I only saw the result. The Karuvit command ship, the lead hull, the one that had docked, the brain of the whole stripping party, was hanging off our main lock, fat and confident, doing what command ships do, which is sit safely back and direct. It had no reason to expect a threat. The station had no teeth. Everyone knew the turret was dead. It was a fact, logged and filed. The old man's dead gun put a round through the command ship's reactor housing, and the fact died, and so did the command ship. I felt it through the station, the way I had felt the fire. A second great shudder. On the external feed I watched the lead Karuvit hull come apart, slow and silent and enormous, the way big things die in the dark, blooming outward in a flower of debris and light, and I watched the 8 remaining ships react, and for the first time all night I saw the Karuvit do something other than advance. I saw them hesitate. 8 ships and a wobble went through their formation. A flinch. They had lost a boarding party to fire, and now they had lost their command ship to a gun that was supposed to be dead, fired by a station that was supposed to be helpless, and somewhere in whatever passed for their minds, a number was changing. The job was going wrong. The job never went wrong, and now it was going wrong in ways they could not predict, because the thing they were fighting did not obey the rules that everything else in the galaxy obeyed. If they had run then, most of them would have lived. But scavengers are greedy, and greed is its own kind of stubbornness, and they did not run. They committed. The 8 ships closed in and threw everything they had left at Drennan Reach, every boarding team, every lance, all of it. A final hard push to overwhelm the impossible little station before whatever was happening could happen anymore. And up in the dorsal blister, the old man kept firing. I watched his feet again now. I made myself watch it. He was alone up there in the cold, breath fogging, those swollen old hands moving over the controls of a gun he had resurrected with a bag of parts he kept ready for exactly this. And he was picking off boarding craft as they crossed the open. One and then another and then another. Methodical, unhurried, that same terrible human unhurriedness, as if he had all the time in the world when he had almost none. They found him, of course. A station has a shape, and a gun that keeps firing tells you where the gunner is. 2 boarding craft peeled off from the assault and came for the dorsal blister, and I saw them coming on the external feed, and I screamed into the comm for Marco to get out, to run, to leave the gun and go. The old man's voice came back, calm, almost warm. He said, "Can't, son, they're still coming. Somebody's got to keep the sky honest." Keep the sky honest. I did not know what it meant. I am not sure he did either exactly. I think it was just an old man's way of saying I am not done and I will not leave a job half finished, and I have decided this is where I stand. He kept firing. He took one of the 2 craft that came for him. The other one reached the blister. I will not describe what I saw. I have described it to the inspectors and to the officers, and I will not describe it again. Not in the telling I give to viewers, not to anyone who did not need to know. I will only tell you that the old man kept the sky honest until the very last second of his life, and that the gun went silent only when there was no one left to fire it, and that the last thing on his feed before it died was his swollen old hand, still resting on the housing of the gun he had brought back from the dead, the same gentle way he had touched it when he told it not tonight. We don't quit tonight. He did not quit, not that night, not ever as it turned out. Marco's death broke something open, not in the humans the way you might think, in me. Because I watched the others learn he was gone, I had to tell them, it fell to me, sitting in my comms ring, to say into the channel that the dorsal turret was lost and the old man with it, and I braced for them to break. That is what loss does. Among my people, when the predator takes one of us, the herd's nerve shatters, and that is the moment the rest scatter and run, and that is correct, that is survival, that is the arithmetic. The humans did not break, they did the opposite. I felt it come through the comm, through the feeds, through the whole shuddering body of the station. The grief hit them. I heard Iris make a sound I will hear until I die, and then the grief turned into something else, something with a hard edge, and the 6 humans who had been holding became 5 humans who were no longer holding. They had been defending. After Marco, they stopped defending. They went forward. I do not have good words for what the last part of that night was. The Karuvit had committed everything. All their remaining boarding teams were inside the station now, and they should, by numbers, by every measure, have been winning. And instead I watched 5 grieving humans push them back through the corridors they had cut their way into, push them back toward their breaches, push them out into the dark, and the Karuvit went. The Karuvit who took inventory from helpless stations, the Karuvit who never lost, they went. Because there is nothing in the universe more frightening than a human who has just lost someone and decided that the thing in front of them is the reason. This is the third thing, and it is the one the old treaties are really about when you read them closely. The galaxy does not fear human strength. The galaxy fears human grief. Because for every other species I know, grief is a weakness, a thing that takes the fight out of you, a wound that makes the prey slower. For humans, grief is fuel. You take something from them and they do not become less. They become more. They become quiet and unhurried and absolutely without limit. And they come for the thing that did it, and they do not stop. And they do not run the cold arithmetic that would tell any sensible creature to cut its losses and survive. They have decided the arithmetic does not apply to them. And the terrible thing, the thing that flinched the universe and ended the Karuvit that night, is that often enough to be written into law by species who learned it in blood, the universe agrees with them. The remaining Karuvit ships ran. What was left of them? 3 hulls out of 9, fleeing back into the dark they had come from, leaving their boarding teams behind, leaving their dead, leaving the salvage they had come to take. They had docked expecting to take a station apart and sell its people in the markets past the law. They left having lost 2/3 of their force to a half-rotted refueling drift, to 6 humans, to fire and a dead gun, and a thing they had no name for and could not fight. I tracked them on my long-range scope until they jumped away. I tracked them long after I needed to. I think I needed to be sure. I think the prey in me needed to watch the predator run just once to believe it could happen. And then it was quiet, truly quiet. The station groaned and ticked and settled, the way it always did, as if nothing had happened, as if it had not just screamed. We had held the dark. The relief ship came 11 hours later. A company patrol responding to the distress beacon that, I learned afterward, Hollies had set the moment the first contact appeared on my scope, set it and said nothing because he knew, the way the humans all seemed to know, that help was 11 hours away and the night was now. And that the beacon was for the counting and the recording, not for the saving. The saving they would have to do themselves. The saving they did do themselves. The patrol crew came aboard expecting a stripped husk and corpses. That is what a distress beacon from a refueling drift, gone silent for hours, means. They came aboard braced for the worst. What they found was 29 survivors out of 30. The Solani, the Garu, the Thren family, the small ones unharmed, gathered safe in the core behind a door that had never been breached because of a woman named Petra who held a junction with a pipe and a torch and a reason. The Vesh from the galley. Me in my comms ring, alive, soft, Thren, alive. 29 of us. And 5 humans, wounded, gray with exhaustion and grief, who had done the thing the galaxy fears. 1 lost, Marco, the old man who kept the sky honest, 1 out of 30. The patrol officer who came up to my comms ring was a Solani, and he looked at my feeds, at the recordings of the night, the fire and the gun and the corridors, and he was quiet for a long time. Solani do not show much, but I had worked alongside Solani for years, and I knew the stillness in him was not calm. It was the stillness of someone recalculating everything they thought they knew. He said to me, 30 souls, 6 humans, 9 Karuvat hulls. He said it the way you say a thing that does not add up. This should not have ended this way. No, I said, it should not have. Why did it? He asked. And he was not really asking me. He was asking the universe. He was asking the question the whole galaxy has been asking since it first met humanity, the question buried in every careful treaty, the question that empties out the markets past the law whenever a human crew is rumored to be coming. Why does it never end the way the arithmetic says it should, when there are humans in the gap? I thought about Marco's hand on the dead gun. Not tonight. We don't quit tonight. I thought about Petra in the junction. Iris was behind that junction. I thought about Holly steadying me through the calm after the fire, the quiet man comforting the soft creature. You did right, breathe. I thought about Wren's one flat sentence to the scavengers who had called us inventory. There are 6 of us and you have made a mistake. And I gave the Solani officer the only answer I had, the answer I had earned across the worst and most important night of my long, careful life. I said because the rest of us do the math and accept the answer. And they don't. They never have. They look at the answer and they decide it's wrong and then they make it wrong. That's the whole thing. That's all of it. That's why everyone is afraid. I went to find the humans before the patrol took us off the station. They were in the core, the 5 of them, sitting on the floor among the wreckage, close together the way they always were, touching, leaning into each other, except now I understood it, now I knew what the constant touching was for. They were not soft. They were holding each other together. They had always been holding each other together. I had thought it was weakness, the touching, the warmth, the loudness. It was the opposite. It was the thing that made them unbeatable. It was the reason there was always a human in the gap. Iris was crying for Marco. Deshan had his arm around her. Petra sat against the wall with her wound bound and her eyes closed. Holly sat apart a little, quiet as ever, but Wren had her hand on his shoulder and he was letting her, and that small thing told me more than any words. I did not know what to say. We do not have rituals for this among the Thren. We grieve by going on. So I just went and I sat down with them, among them, a soft Thren in the circle of warm, grieving humans, which is a thing no one of my kind had ever done in the history of my people, and I did not say anything at all. Wren looked at me. Her face was gray and her eyes were red and she had blood on her, some of it Marco's, I think. And she said very quietly, "You stayed." "I stayed," I said. "You could have made the pod. Holly's told you to, you had time." "I know. Why didn't you?" And I told her the truth, the same truth I have given you, because the truth is the only thing this story is good for. I said, because I did not want to be the one who ran while you held the dark for me, for the first time in my life. I did not want to be that. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she did a human thing. She reached over slow so I could move away if I wanted, but I did not move away, and she put her warm hand on my shell, on my back, the place where my people are most armored and least touched, the place that means the most for us to let anyone near. She said, "Then you're one of us now, whether you like it or not." I did not have a word for what I felt. I told you before that the humans have a dangerous word, belonging, and that I understood why my people never made one of our own. I understand it even better now. It is dangerous because once you have it, the arithmetic stops working for you too. Once you belong, you become the kind of creature that stays, the kind that holds the dark, the kind the galaxy learned, long ago and at great cost, to fear. I am Thren. The one who runs first lives longest. That is what I was for the first 40 years of my life. I am not that anymore. I sat down in a circle of grieving humans on the floor of a dying station, and a woman put her warm hand on my shell and told me I was one of them, and I became something my people do not have a word for and may be wiser never to learn. I became someone who stays. They ask me at the end every time, "Were you afraid of them?" No, I have told you. I was afraid for them, all that long night, for Petra in the junction, for the old man in the cold, for Holly's alone in the dark with his fire, for the two young ones, for all of them, these warm, impossible creatures who would not do the sensible thing and run. And then, somewhere between the fire and the dawn that has no dawn out there in the dark between the stars, I stopped being afraid for them, and I understood, really understood, in my gut where my people keep the oldest truths, why the galaxy is afraid of them, why the treaties are written, why the market's empty, why even the Garu, who fear almost nothing, get quiet and change the subject. It is not the strength, we have stronger. It is not the cleverness, we have cleverer. It is that every other species in the galaxy, when the answer comes back you cannot win, accept the loss, save what you can, every other species reads that answer and obeys it. It is wisdom. It is survival. It kept my people breathing for 200,000 years, and I will never call it cowardice. But the humans read that same answer, the cold and final answer, and they put their hand flat on it the way the old man put his hand on the dead gun. And they say, quiet, unhurried, certain, not tonight. And the terrible thing, the thing that ended 9 Karuvat hulls above a station nobody had ever heard of, the thing that is written in blood into the oldest careful laws of the galaxy, is how often the universe listens. That is why they are feared, not because of what they can do, because of what they refuse to accept. I stood with humans once on the worst night of my life, and I have never been the same, and I never will be, and I would not change it for all the long, safe running years my people promised me when I was young. We don't quit tonight. I understand that now. I am one of them,